GPT 5.6 Terra pumps out tokens more than twice as fast as Fable 5 and costs 4 times less on input. That's not a rounding error between these two models, and it changes the math on pretty much every project you've run through either one. Both Fable 5 and GPT 5.6 Terra dropped recently, and people are already building real stuff with them. So I pulled every published benchmark, spec sheet, and community report I could find and ran them through 5 real tests. No vendor money, verified sources only. And honestly, the part that surprised me most wasn't the speed or the price gap. It was what I still can't actually measure yet between these two, and how much that missing data might flip the whole decision for you depending on what you're building. All right, so who is this actually for? If you're a game developer, a writer, or someone building narrative-heavy apps, picking the wrong model here means you're either paying way more than you need to, or you're shipping shallower stories than your users expect. And that's a real cost, not a hypothetical one. Test 1 is narrative generation, depth, and branching. And when a model gets this wrong, your story branches collapse into the same 3 outcomes. Characters lose their voice halfway through a scene, and players notice immediately. That's the kind of thing that kills a game's reviews in the first week. So I looked at what's actually published here, and honestly, it's thin. Fable 5 gets consistent community praise for creative writing quality, which is something, but what surprised me is there are 0 published benchmarks for GPT 5.6 Terra on creative writing tasks. You can see on screen both cells are marked unverified, and that's not me being lazy, that's just the state of the data right now. Take this with a grain of salt too, because the Fable 5 praise is all community reports, not controlled tests. GPT 5.6 Terra is positioned as a balanced everyday model rather than a creative specialist. But that doesn't mean it can't write well. We just don't have the data to say either way yet. I was expecting at least 1 published creative writing score for GPT 5.6 Terra, and what I got was nothing on that side, so this one's a tie. I can't call it fairly with what's available, and the score stays at 0-0, 1 test tied. That data gap is going to matter later. Test 2 is real-time performance and latency. And if you've ever sat there watching a loading spinner while your model churns through a long story branch, you know exactly how bad this feels. Slow generation breaks immersion, and in a live game context, it can straight up make your product feel broken. What surprised me here is just how wide the gap is. Fable 5 measured at 63.4 tokens per second in max effort mode, and GPT 5.6 Terra came in at 139 tokens per second from an independent benchmark, which is more than double. Fable's number is max effort mode, specifically so your mileage may vary, but the direction of that gap is hard to argue with. Okay, so the caveat here is real. Fable 5's time to first token in max effort mode is 109 seconds, which is long. But that's a specific configuration, and we don't have Terra's time to first token at all. So total latency is still an incomplete picture. Output token speed is just one part of the story. I was expecting Terra to be faster, but not by this much. GPT 5.6 Terra takes this test cleanly because it's pushing out tokens at more than double Fable 5's rate, and that's a verified source number, which puts the running score at Fable 5.0, GPT 5.6 Terra 1, with 1 test still tied. Test 3 is customization flexibility and world building. And when a model can bend to your world's rules, your characters start acting generic, your lore breaks, and you end up spending hours patching prompts instead of building. That's the failure mode here, and it's a slow, frustrating one. So what I found here is pretty interesting. Fable 5 has community demos showing you can generate a fully playable video game from a single text prompt, which is genuinely wild, but GPT 5.6 Terra has no comparable capability reported anywhere, and on screen you'll see both world building rows are still unverified because nobody's done a controlled test on either side. Now, the Fable 5 game generation thing is a demo, not a repeatable benchmark. So I take it as one impressive example rather than a proven capability. Terra's customization story is a blank slate right now, and it might be just as flexible once someone actually tests it head to head, because we genuinely don't know yet. I was ready to hand this one to Fable 5 based on the game generation demo, but without a controlled comparison, I can't score it, so another tie. Running score is still Fable 5.0, GPT 5.6 Terra 1, and now 2 tests are tied because the data just isn't there to separate them fairly on this dimension. Test 4 is cost per session and API pricing, and this is the one that sneaks up on you. You start prototyping, the per token cost feels fine, and then you scale up and your bill is suddenly 4 times what you planned. That's not a rounding error, that's a budget crisis. Okay, so the numbers here are very clear. Fable 5 runs at $10 per million input tokens and $50 per million output tokens, while GPT 5.6 Terra is $2.50 per million input and $15 per million output. That's 4 times cheaper on input and 3.3 times cheaper on output. And I was not expecting the output gap to be that wide. GPT 5.6 Terra wins this one, and it's not close. Input tokens run 4 times cheaper. Output tokens run 3.3 times cheaper. And those are published verified rates, which moves the score to Fable 500, GPT 5.6 Terra 2 with 2 ties. If you're running heavy generation tasks, That cost gap compounds fast. Test 5 is community content and mod support. And when there's no community around a tool, you're solving every problem from scratch with no shared prompts, no example projects, no one to ask when something breaks. That's a real-time cost, especially early in a project when you're still figuring out what the model can actually do. What I found here is that Fable 5 users were already sharing games and apps within 72 hours of launch, which is a real active community, while GPT-5.6 Terra has no published community content at all right now. On the mod support side, you can see on screen that both models are unverified, so that part of the comparison is still open. That said, community size at launch is kind of a moving target. GPT-5.6 Terra runs on one of the most widely used API platforms in the world, so it could build the following fast. And the Fable 5 head start is real right now, but it's not necessarily a permanent advantage. Honestly, I was expecting to give this one to Fable 5 outright, but with mod support unverified on both sides, it lands as another tie. So the final running score is Fable 5.0, GPT 5.6, Terra 2, 3 tests tied. Fable has the active creator base right now, but I can't score what I can't measure. So here's where Fable 5 is clearly ahead. The community consistently calls it out for narrative depth and creative writing quality. It's the only model here that's shown it can turn a single text prompt into a fully playable game. And it already has an active creator community sharing projects that GPT 5.6 Terra simply doesn't have yet. And here's where GPT 5.6 Terra is clearly ahead. It runs at 139 tokens per second versus Fable 5's 63.4. So it's more than double the output speed. And on price, it's 4 times cheaper per input token and 3.3 times cheaper per output token, which at scale is a very significant difference. I was expecting a cleaner winner, and what I got was 2 verified wins for GPT, 5.6 Terra on speed and cost, and 3 honest ties where the data just isn't there yet. So here's the call. If you're doing heavy narrative work, building games where you want a community to learn from, go Fable 5. If you need fast, cheap generation at scale, Terra wins. 4 times cheaper on input. That's the number.